The ancient gods of Mount Olympus gave cheese to mortals as a gift, or so the story goes. Zeus himself had been fed as a baby by the sacred goat Amalthea, and he later flooded the sky with a galaxy of milk to feed his own son Hercules. These mighty figures of Greek myth, along with legendary monsters like the Cyclops, were written up as avid consumers of Feta and Caseri in Homer's epic poem The Odyssey in the 8th century BCE. By that time, many other written records suggest that humans had long since mastered the divine art of cheesemaking. The Roussas family of Thessaly might be seen as inheritors and custodians of that tradition, making Feta and Caseri as they do in the manner passed down to them through many centuries of expertise.
Feta making is a very old tradition in Greece. We tried to keep the maximum of this ancient technique. We imitated exactly the old traditional way to do the cheese in a very modern dairy now with high hygiene standards and quality standards, with new machinery, but exactly the same technique that they used in the past.
This is not as contradictory as it may sound at first, the old ways in question being those of the Sarakatsani, a tribe of shepherding families.
Sarakatsani is a very old tribe in Greece. They traveled from the valleys to the mountains in the summertime, and they had mainly herds of sheep. They lived in a tribe. All of them were relatives, and they formed a small society, their own land on the mountains. They were people who did not disturb at all the environment, very proud of their profession.
His mother and her brothers were all members of that tribe, descended from a long line of nomad farmers who made feta by hand from their herds and cooled it in high caves or lakes. They founded their own dairy in 1952, and having recently celebrated its 70th anniversary, their sons have also lately invested millions of euros in upgrades that include a new waste treatment facility and a more energy-efficient processing plant powered by photovoltaic cells. The business can now produce more than 15,000 tons of cheese per year, exporting up to 95% to the US, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, with multiple Roussas products, including vacuum-packed, barrel-aged, and organic varieties of feta sold at Spinneys.
Feta doing is a very simple job when you produce that for your own at home. You can boil the milk, and then you can convert the milk in cheese by adding rennet. But when you are doing that in a large scale, it's very difficult and very delicate. You have to imitate exactly the old conditions in the caves to have low temperature and high moisture, high relative humidity. And you have to imitate exactly these conditions at the dairy with modern technique and modern equipment.
That process now begins with filtering, chilling, and pasteurizing the milk before adding the rennet and cultures. The sheer size of the Roussas operation means stirring vast quantities with huge stainless steel whisks that look something like indoor wind turbines, then cutting the curd into neat cubes with mathematically precise automated blades.
About 30% is then set aside in triangular molds
to be strained, rested, then dry rubbed with Greek sea salt to help it develop the right kinds of bacteria before it goes into the barrels for aging. While the regular Roussas feta is fantastic, the closest thing in their range to the ancient artisanal cheese is the kind matured in those beechwood barrels, like Sarakatsani shepherds used to do it. In the past, the tribe used only natural materials. They had no cold storage, so they would preserve their cheese in barrels made by people who lived in the mountains, who cut the wood from the forest and left it for 2 years to dry before shaping it by hand,
We mainly support the remaining families in this business on a small village on the mountains. They are maybe less than 5 families now who are doing wooden barrels for cheese.
The barrel is no less essential to the process as the cheese itself, and the particular craft of coopering for this purpose is now practiced by only a handful of operators in Greece. The Roussas dairy is supplied by a small factory in the northwestern village of Anilio, the name of which means the place without sun, and refers to its position in the shadows of surrounding peaks and tall black pines below the ski resort of Metsovo. The area has its own dairy traditions, reaching across the Pindus Mountains to fantastical monastery-topped rock forms known as the Meteora, where the monks made renowned cheeses like Mezzavone and Mezzovella. For more than 100 years, the Timpas family has felled, rendered, and replanted beech trees in that region of ribbon-like roads through thick woodlands. Beech being ideal for maturing cheese because it enhances without overpowering the flavor. Reposing in those Timpas barrels for a minimum of 3 months, the feta is rolled or taken for a walk at least 3 times in that period to circulate well before the wood is cracked by hand with a hammer. What comes out, says Alexandros, has special properties derived from the surrounding timbers and the absence of brine.
The big advantage of the maturation in the wooden barrels is that the cheese has just a few brine. This is the natural environment for the cheese to be well matured and take all this woody taste from the barrel. When we produce the feta cheese in tins or in big stainless steel containers, the brine that it is in the containers represents 10–20% of the volume, of the total volume. That means that there is the cheese and there is a lot of brine as well. In the barrel, there is just the cheese. So it comes in contact with wood, it absorbs the maximum of the wood. This gives to the cheese a special sharp taste, a little bit sharper taste than the cheese in the tins. And you can distinguish this cheese from the cheese that is in a lot of brine, in a big amount of brine.
The beech barrel is the natural environment for feta, as far as Alexandros is concerned, and the best means of preserving the floral and herbal aromas of the landscape from which it was sourced. The Roussas work with about 700 farmers of free-roaming herds. Some are based close to the dairy, but the brand also draws from many other mountain pastures, all within the bounds of the broad geographic area where Greek feta has been legally classed as a regional product by PDO designation since 2002.
These free-ranging herds on the mountains have a lot of different flora from the veggies. If you are, let's say, a good connoisseur of the cheese, you can taste that. And this is something that I have always to try to find in our cheese.
That spread now allows for a year-round operation based on the continuous coagulation of sheep milk, where formerly that raw material was only available in certain seasons. And while the EU rules around PDO feta allow for the addition of up to 35% goat milk to the mix, the Roussas recipe keeps that quotient down to only 7% or so for reasons that come back to taste.
We use a small percentage of goat milk because goat milk gives a very sharp taste in the cheese. So using less goat milk means that the final product is well receivable from every consumer around the world.
Alexandros admits to being very critical when sampling the feta that bears his family name. In many ways, he is overseeing a thoroughly modern international business centered on a state-of-the-art production chain, replete with automated pasteurization units, the latest in sustainable packaging tech, and a fleet of trucks with chilled container tanks for transporting ewe milk over and around the high ground once occupied by gods who threw thunderbolts. In other ways, which are literal and practical as much as poetic or romantic, Alexandros is still seeking flavors and fragrances of the past.
Our family used to take us every summer for at least 2 months on the mountains to live very close to the places where our forefathers lived, to be in contact with the places where they grown up. Their food, mainly pies, the cheese from the milk, veggies from around, very, very simple material. And with this simple material, they produced mainly pies. We try to keep these habits for our families as well. My wife is also cooking these nice pies. So I have all these memories in my mind. When I am in the dairy, we keep the old memories.